And welcome back to another edition of Take 5. Groz with Gas going to places unknown to get the hot stories for you.
That's exactly what we'll do. And I wonder if Take 5 will ever achieve the notoriety that the Groz with Gas show did. Did you see Jim Moore named us as the best sports talk show in Seattle history for whatever that is worth? And I'll tell you, it felt pretty damn good. That was a nice thing.
I think it's worth a lot coming from Jim Moore personally, too.
Yeah.
I was surprised and pleased.
Yeah, I was too. I only had one quibble with him, and I don't even know who I'd take off. It was a cool thing. He did it on his Substack, and I think the News Tribune picked it up, and the Everett Herald picked it up, and like one of my neighbors up here freaked out, like, "Oh my God, did you see this?" I'm like, "Well, yeah." He called me and asked me for ideas, so yeah,
me too.
I kind of knew it was coming. I'd have put David Locke in there. Nighttime radio is hard to do, and Locke did a great job. And Locke was I'm not a big analytics guy, as you know, but Locke was way ahead of everybody on that. He got the analytics side of it and the blogging side of it early. But I don't know who I'd kick off. Probably somebody I didn't like and be vindictive and mean about it. But it was fun.
I thought of two guys, and one of whom he did use was John Clayton. That may have been on his list anyway. I don't know how he could have kept Clayton off a list like that because
he was on it.
30-year show that he did. And I said, you know what? New York Vinny. I mean, is there a more likely success story in Seattle sports talk radio than New York Vinny? How is this guy possibly successful? And it's because he had a certain je ne sais quoi that just worked, and I thought he had a remarkable career.
And I'll throw Michael in there, too. Michael and Vinny, they were overshadowed a little bit when Mitch moved in the mornings because Mitch was an incredible talent and so good in a morning show. Well, Michael and Vinny kind of got the beachhead established. The Bear and Ship tried to get it going. We always joke about it, nobody knew what to do with mornings on sports radio forever. And so, yeah, Vinny definitely, maybe Michael Knight. There's been a lot of pretty cool people move through. The Babe was on the list, certainly, and should have been.
Sure.
And, if the Babe had stayed longer, would be the easy number one choice, but she was going to move and move on. Is she still working? Is she still doing overnights down in Tampa?
I don't think so. I just heard from her yesterday, so I don't believe she's working anymore. But she's still out there occasionally tweeting.
Good,
fighting a good fight.
We got to get her on this show. See if we can get through 20 minutes without all of us screaming at each other.
It'd be fun if we could scream at each other, but I don't know. I'm not confident in my ability to get her on the show. Meaning that I don't think I can get her to technically figure it out. Not that she wouldn't do it; she'd do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll see. We got a guest today. Larry Stone's going to join us in just a few minutes. And before we end, we'll geek out on baseball. I was happy to see the news this morning. Stephen Fry is okay. There's not really a good angle, but it's a knee to the head, which soccer's amazing that there aren't more crazy injuries with guys
especially with goalies, man. Especially with goalies.
And a couple things came to mind. I thought it was interesting that they chose to stop the game. There was probably time for one more corner kick.
Actually, it was the coach of
Columbus, right?
Who insisted on it. The referee was going to restart the game with 30 seconds, and coach of Columbus said, nope, that's it. So that's why they stopped it, which was a nice move.
It was very interesting. It turns out it's a draw. But the other thing that struck me as I was thinking about it last night is there's an amazing amount of things that the Sounders have done over the years, just as an organization, and they've grown, and they've been great, and they've been so stable. But never more stable than at their keeper position, which has really been manned by three guys since 2009. Casey Keller, at the tail end of his sensational career, was spectacular. Michael Sperning is forgotten about a little bit, but he was good. He had a 2-year run, and they didn't hurt for having him in there. And then Stephen Fry, since then, who I always say, arrived here as damaged goods. He'd had a knee injury. Is he even going to be able to play? And has authored one of the great careers in Seattle sports history. They've had three keepers, a position that's pretty volatile, kind of amazing. And I'm glad Steph is okay. I don't know if he'll need some time off. Tommy Dutra is their goalkeeper coach, and he's been there from the start. He's been with Schmetz forever, and he's really, really smart and good at his job, obviously.
All right, well, that's good to know, but yeah, it was scary, definitely scary, but we'll see. Sounds like he's going to be better, and I saw him tweet about 20 minutes ago or something like that. So, that's good. And then, can you believe it, Gas? 4 Seattle Mariners are playing in the All-Star game.
I mean,
4.
I know. I kind of can. I can kind of believe it because they've been pretty good. And as we introduce the 4 All-Stars, a 5th All-Star makes his way into the Groz with Gas show. Take 5. and there he is, sports writer emeritus at the Seattle Times. They really should have you on the masthead every day, I think, Larry. Larry Stone, how are you, man? Good to see you.
Great to see both of you guys. Miss you.
Well, here you are. Now you no longer have to miss us. You could stare at us longingly and be. I want to point this out because it's funny how guys handle retirement, Dave. We've got to let Larry go by like 8:50 or thereabouts this morning as we record this, because he's got a golf junket he's going on. He's not going golfing. He's not meeting some friends to play golf. He's going on a junket, which I don't even know what that is.
What is it, Larry?
Well, it's a golf trip. I just use the word junket as a little joke, but yeah, I'm the cliche. I'm the walking cliche, the guy who retires and then plays golf all the time. But I really enjoyed it. I'm heading up to Squim to play Cedars at Dungeness, and then a friend of mine, matter of fact, Don Shelton, my sports editor at the Seattle Times. Then we're going to play Sunland, I think it's called, the next day, and then head home.
Great.
Sounds not bad.
It sounds so. You're going to tear yourself away from this rampaging Mariner team that cannot be scored upon. Let me back up. Let me ask you a question, Dave, and I've discussed it a little bit. Going back to last August, were you surprised that Dan Wilson elected to take the job as manager, and are you surprised that he appears to be pretty good at it?
I'd say no on both fronts, Gas. I don't know if you remember, but about 2 or 3 years ago, he had a stint managing Tacoma. They let him manage for a week. There were some issues. I think the manager needed to take a vacation or a break or something. And
golf junket.
or a golf junket. And I did a column on him after that, and he expressed how much he liked managing and how he wanted to pursue that, at some point in the future. So I was not surprised that they turned to him. What the surprise was that they immediately made him the permanent manager instead of the interim manager, which is what we all thought, I think. And but they just gave him the job moving forward, and it turned out, they played 600 balls the rest of the season, and I think he's shown a kind of a deft touch this year, guiding them through some valleys that they've had, and they've come out the other side pretty well. So, maybe strategically he's still learning, but I think that, to me, 80% of managing is handling the clubhouse, and I think he does that aspect of it very well.
I know you're familiar with a guy named Edgar Martinez.
I've heard of him, yeah.
I believe he wrote a book about him. And Edgar, of course, was with Dan on the teams in the 90s and joined him in as being hitting coach for this. Did that surprise you that he went back into the dugout?
That did. Groz, that did surprise me a little bit, because he had that, he tried it. He did it for 3 seasons and then decided to step away because it was too time consuming. He wanted to spend more time with the family. I think the fact that his teammate and buddy Dan Wilson asked him, I think that held a lot of sway. I think he liked the idea of being with Dan. And, he was hitting coach through the end of last year. This year, he's director of hitting strategy. And, he's not the nuts and bolts guy. That's Kevin Seitzer. So I think that gives him a little freedom. He's not on every road trip. So I think it's a perfect kind of a happy medium for him, where he can put his impact on the hitters, but he doesn't have to be there every hour of every day. Hitting coach is the most demanding job in baseball coaching by far, because you got to show up at noon and practically and be there in the cage right up till game time practically.
And then afterwards, if you got to talk to a guy who's now 0 for 40 or something, it's such a tough job anyway. You mentioned strategically. I think Dan, we all would agree, Dan's personality is such that as he learns the strategic side of the game, or learns more about it, he knows of it. He's a guy who's approachable. A coach could come up to him and say, "Dan, have you thought about this?" Right? I sense that Dan's got that style of personality, that he's not going to be above trying to learn stuff. Surprise, the fans tend to complain about how he uses the bullpen, which puts him in line with every other manager in the history of the game.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? I think Dan always struck me as a guy who's I think he enjoys learning about the game.
Yeah, and I think you're right. He was a catcher. He looked at the game from a catcher's perspective. So it's no mystery why so many managers come from the catching profession, including Scott Service. And I think one thing about Dan is I think he has more of a kind of a competitive fire than people think. It's everyone looks at him as a easygoing, friendly Dan, but I think he's a highly competitive guy. I've heard tales from his former teammates that there was a lot more, like I said, fire to him than meets the eye, and I think that translates well to the manager's chair too. But I think, yeah, I mean, this is a guy who, other than that week I was mentioning, had never sat in the dugout in a manager's role. It's all learning on the job, and I think he's going to get better and better at that aspect of it. But the part about relating to the players, I think you either have that or you don't, and he's got that.
Right.
Can you compare the season Cal Raleigh's having to anything you've seen over the years, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, all it comes back to me is like the steroids guys, McGuire and Sosa and Bonds, and in that light, when Cal's clean, I firmly believe that.
It looks the same. I guess that's the thing that we get. It's got going for him right now. It looks the same. Usually look for pretty telltale signs, and you don't see any.
Exactly. He's a big, strong guy. Always was. He's hit 30 home runs before. It's not like he came out of nowhere. Guys. Roger Maris came out of
nowhere.
Hit 62. He wasn't a big physical specimen. It could be done. If it could be done in 1961, why can't it be done in 2025? It's when you factor in the fact that he's a catcher, Dave, it's one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen. The question I have is, what will the toll of the season take on him and catching? In past years, he's actually gotten stronger in the second half and had better numbers. So if that happens, I mean, we're looking at a season for the ages. But I just worry about the toll of catching and what that's going to do to him as the season grinds on.
But there are the guys that come along that, for whatever reason, because your point is well taken, but there's the Johnny Bench, there's Pudge Rodriguez, Carlton Fisk, these guys that for whatever reason physically are built in such a way that they can take that pounding. Someday Cal will probably, if he's blessed with good health and a long career, he'll probably have to move to another position like catchers tend to do near the end of their career. But for now, and we've got a catcher in there in the manager's seat too, so you've got a guy who's attuned to that or thinks about it a little bit. But you're right. I think the thing I keep saying is I would pull Cal into my manager's office and he would say, "Who are you again?" And I would say, "I'm the guy who's telling you to stop stealing bases right now. Just stop. We don't." But how do you put the bridle on a colt, man? How do you do that? When he's just, I want to do it.
Yeah. And you're right. He's a big, strong guy. He's fairly young. It's not like he's been catching for 10 years in the major leagues. He's been catching for 3 years essentially, and right. So he's, as long as they give him occasional DH days, I think he'll be fine. The other question is how teams will continue to pitch to him. Will they pitch around him more and more? A Rosarena suddenly getting hot behind him is a huge deal, I think, to force teams to pitch to him. And, they need to get one more big bat somehow at the trade deadline would really lengthen this lineup and help this team, hold this wild card spot, maybe even make a run at the Astros. So that's what I'm fascinated about for the next 2 weeks is what they're going to do.
It's funny you mentioned that, and there was a trade made. I mean, not technically at the deadline, but the Devers trade felt like a deadline trade, and the Giants made that trade, Larry. I think they were tied with the Dodgers in first place. We're rolling. Since then, they've lost 11 of 19. They're 7 games back. Now, it just stuff happens, but it's a reminder that you see what you need and you think you get it, but you don't necessarily get it in baseball.
Yeah, that's a great point. There were a lot of people who thought the Mariners should have jumped into the Devers sweepstakes, and they could have probably done it player-wise. They probably could have made a better offer than the Giants did, but they weren't going to take on $250 million in salary. And
tried that, didn't like it.
Yeah.
With
Yeah,
Cano.
who knows when it's going to hit? And I remember in '93 I was covering the Giants, and they were in a dog fight with the Braves, and then the Braves got Fred McGriff, and just actually the Braves were way behind, and then the acquisition of McGriff just they took off and ended up winning the division. Sometimes those kind of moves work out exactly like you think they're going to, but sometimes, as in the Devers case, it backfires. So be careful what you wish for to a certain extent.
Dave and I have discussed this a lot, and more so in the offseason than now, because I'm not even sure what you can get. There's not that many teams that are out of it. There's not going to be that many great guys available. So I don't think you even have to consider this now. But in the offseason, and I'll ask you how you feel about it, I've brought up the idea that, look, at some point, maybe you have to get rid of one of these great pitchers. I mean, they've got a great pitching staff, and we just got reminded of that over the weekend. Pittsburgh came in red hot and couldn't do anything. But as in the winter, when in theory everyone's available, nobody's in a pennant race, you can have a discussion about any player. What would you do? Would you consider dangling one of these great pitchers the Mariners have if you get good value back? And Dave has gone on the other. I said I would. Davis said no, let's not mess with the pitching staff, which is a reasonable argument on its own.
Yeah, just as an aside, I think we're seeing now why you should make your moves in the off season, because with the third wild card, if you say, oh, we'll just fill this hole in July, there's just not that many people available anymore, because everybody, as you said, thinks they're in it. The Orioles are having a terrible season. They're about 6.5 games out of the wild card. They could think, man, we win 9 out of 10. We're right back in it. So you should do your work in the offseason when, as you said, everybody is theoretically available. And the Mariners just did not do that this offseason. They got Polanco and they got Solano, and that was virtually it. When just imagine if they had really gone out and gotten a big bat, or this offseason, or the offseason before, or the offseason before. But to answer your other question, I would certainly consider it. Emerson Hancock and Logan Evans have shown that they could be serviceable number 5 starters. But you also have the number 1 or 2 or 3 ranked farm system. And I think it's less painful in the immediate sense to dip into that to make impact trades. But those are the kind that could come back and haunt you in the long run. I'm sure they're going to end up trading 2 or 3 of their top 100 prospects at this trade deadline. It's a tough call. Sometimes those guys turn into Adam Jones or Ketel Marte, and sometimes they're never heard from again. So you have to know your own personnel. But I think my first preference would be to trade prospects rather than to get rid of a George Kirby or a Logan or one of those guys.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you got a good catcher in that organization who can go because of Cal Raleigh, and just won back-to-back games 1-0. We're not trading pitchers, guys. You can win 1-0.
Just think if they had traded this offseason.
They'd have been screwed.
They would have been in trouble because Gilbert, Kirby, all those guys have been on the IL, and
they're going to come back in August. In July and August here, where other teams are kind of wearing down a little bit, and they're going to have some pretty fresh arms that are on awfully good bodies. They're awfully good players. So I kind of personally feel like they're in decent shape here going into the second half, Larry. But Houston is out in front. And they've actually, speaking of the third wild card spot, I think they've had it for a month now, haven't they? I mean, they've been in there.
Yeah.
Who do you look at in Toronto is leading the Yankees in the National League East. I mean, Detroit is running away with the Central. It's a hard year to figure out who's going to do what this year. I mean, what do you think the stretch run is going to look like for the Mariners in the West?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta tip your cap, to use a cliche I'd hope to get rid of when I retired. But you got to tip your hat to the Astros. They lose Tucker, they lose Bregman, on top of losing Correa and so much talent. That's George Springer that they've had when they're in their World Series years, and yet they keep rolling wrong. They're playing 6-12 ball right now. They just swept the Dodgers. They've they've had tremendous amount of injuries, but they're just well-constructed team with a sort of a championship mentality. And they've built up a 7-game lead. Now, last year, the Mariners found out that a 10-game lead isn't safe, but I don't think the Astros are quite as vulnerable. But I agree with you, Dave, that the Mariners are in a pretty good spot right now. Their pitching is healthy again for the most part. And you got to figure that second half Julio is going to show up at some point. To me, that's the key to their whole season. Is he's been a huge disappointment so far this year. Let's just be honest. Yeah. And but if he takes off and does what he's done for spurts the last couple of years, I think they're in decent shape.
We talked about hitting coaches earlier, and I mean, what do you say to Julio the other night at the end of that Royals game when he takes a strike? Take strike 3 when you've got the winning run at, I think, second base or third.
Yeah.
And you're not up there to walk, man. I know it's a 3-2 count. It was a close pitch. It was a great pitch.
Yeah.
Right, caught the inside. You've got to talk to you swing there 100 times out of 100. You swing at that ball. And he just doesn't seem to have the confidence yet. I did see an interesting stat, Larry. I'm sure you saw this too, was that there was a day in May where somebody wrote, Julio today is the exact same age as Aaron Judge was when the Yankees called him up.
Yeah.
In other words, Julio's been asked to do more as a young guy than a lot. The point being, hey, maybe we're still being a little impatient with him because it's a sport that is tough to master. Do you think that he's going to, and not just this year, but that he's going to fulfill the promise they had when they gave him that huge deal?
Maybe not to the extent. I think there was thoughts that this was a guy on a Hall of Fame trajectory, and he may not reach that. But, I'm still very high on Julio. You read the comments on the stories in the Seattle Times and tweets and everything, and, I mean, there's people are so down on him. They want to trade him, send him to Tacoma, all this. Right. When he's probably the best defensive center fielder in baseball. And, he's been disappointing, particularly in clutch situations. I think he's in his own head right now. But 24 years old, still learning. I do think that he's so immensely talented that he's going to figure it out and be a very productive player for them. Maybe not the all-time superstar, but a very good player. And I certainly wouldn't give up on him at this point because he's struggling. But it is painful to watch him in those. Seems like he always comes up in the ninth inning with the one-run game with 2 or 3 men on base, and it just so often he's not coming through. I think his confidence is kind of shot right now.
Well, maybe being named to the All-Star team will help him. Seriously, I mean, maybe make him think that get his confidence back, even though it's a questionable choice. Highly questionable choice.
I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned that he made the team, but it was voted by he got in on the route of player vote, and that just tells you tells you two things: how highly he's regarded by his peers, and how weak the outfield situation in the American League is right now.
Hey, before we let you go, we've got it in the news story we'll do too, but one more thought from you on the Pac-9 or the Pac-8.5 or whatever. I don't think you and I have ever talked about it, and I wanted to ask Mike Silver. We had him on, and we just never got around to it. And he's still wildly emotional about it anyway. Where do you sit as a Cal alum? Take off your sports writer hat and put on your Go Golden Bears hat. Where do you sit with the decision they made to go to the ACC versus maybe staying on the West Coast and being a part of this new thing? And just the mess. I mean, it's easy when you're sitting in a seat where your team wasn't affected, but Cal was pretty dramatically affected by the destruction of West Coast football. Where do you sit with all this?
First of all, I'm stunned that Mike Silver was wildly emotional about something. That's so out of character for him. Well, I wrote about this. I grew up in Southern California, following USC and UCLA. Then I went off to school and went to Cal, and then settled here with the Huskies. So I've been a Pac-8, Pac-10, Pac-12 guy my whole life, and I'm certainly not alone in that. So it hit hard, but as a Cal guy, I hate it. Just feels wrong to me for them to be in the ACC. They're doormats to a certain extent, afterthoughts. So I don't know if there was any good alternative for them though. Once the league collapsed, I don't think they had a choice. I would have preferred to see them go to the Big Ten, which is a more viable conference. But I don't know what the future of Cal athletics is. I don't think they're going to stay in the ACC. I think they want to come back to the West Coast. I think they'll find in the future some sort of haven. I don't know if it'll be a safe haven, but some sort of haven in the West Coast, and maybe they'll even have to downgrade athletics, which Cal being Cal, there are factions of that school that don't believe in big time athletics, and they could well win the day, the same as at Stanford. They see themselves as academic institutions first and athletic programs second.
Well, that's changing a lot of people's minds too. So there are other challenges for those universities as well. It's no easy solutions. You're right about that, man.
Yeah. It's hard to root right now, it's hard to know from with all the player movement, which I support, but it's hard to get a handle on your whatever team you're supporting, who's there this year. It's like a new crop of characters every single year, and it's hard to get behind that.
They could not have mishandled this circumstance any better. I mean, this is a great book for someone to write on mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. Compound it, do it, and for 10 years running. This is what happens. I mean, you box yourself into a corner like the NCAA did.
And I'd argue I've always said Cal and Stanford should get together and call the new Pac-8. I'm telling you, I think they'd fit in that league perfect. They'd have a path to the college football playoff. They could compete. They wouldn't have to travel so far. Just call and say, hey, funny thing, we got drunk one night and agreed to go to the ACC. And I don't know if it'd be that easy. I'm not sure the ACC would see it that way, but I think they'd be a better fit for this new thing that has sprung up, which is not going to be as gaudy as the Pac-10 was, but is going to be better, I think, than having to travel across the country for every one of your sporting events. But
I'd back that. I would actually back that as an alum. I would be.
We've got the stone cabal in our side backing it. All right, before we let you go, Larry, we'll let you participate in our closing segment. The In the News story comes from Welshpool, Wales. A teacher who allegedly chugged booze, hurled profanity, and forced students to dance the Macarena has been fired.
What?
Yeah. Alice Ashton was swigging from a water bottle full of orange liquid, which smelled of alcohol, and was blaring music from her laptop to her health class for 16-year-old students. And the segment they were teaching was how alcohol is dangerous. So she called the students little shits. She gave them all the finger several times.
Oh, man.
She was lively, animated, and speaking with her hands. Now, she denies all of this, but there's closed-circuit TV that shows it all. So she's definitely that way. She was jumping up on her desk on several occasions. She became irritated and was yelling at the students. Now, here's the funny thing, and maybe this makes me want to go to Wales, because you talk about a place that'll forgive a mistake. They've told her, said, listen, we've had a hearing, and you have to sit out for 2 years, but then you'll be allowed to teach again. Now... She's the only one being reasonable about this, because she wrote him a letter back saying, hey, I left Wales, I moved to London, and I'm never going to teach again.
Maybe teaching wasn't the right profession for her.
I don't know. I think she's way ahead of the curve on this one.
Stoney, it's great to see you, man. And tell Don Shelton hello for us, and have fun on your golf junket, and we'll do it again. Thanks very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Great to see you guys. Keep it up. Keep up the great work, and hope to see you both down the road real soon.
Thanks, Larry.
All right. Bye, guys.